Welcome to the SMSF Property Pathway. I'm Jason McCall. For over 12 years, I've assessed property damage as an insurance claims manager and assessor. But now I use that exact experience to physically stress test blue chip SMSF grade properties for high income professionals. If you have a super balance over 250,000 and you're tired of watching it sleep in a retail fund while you work 60 plus hours a week, you are in the right place. On this show, we strip away the industry noise, expose the ATO compliance traps, and show you how to build up towards $100,000 plus tax-free retirement income without sacrificing your weekends. Before we dive into today's episode, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and make a comment, and share it with a colleague who you think needs to wake up their super. Now, let's get to it. You've found the perfect property. You signed the contract. You've just triggered double stamp duty. The ATO doesn't care about the honest mistake. Here is the strict legal sequencing you must follow before you even look at a property. Now, that might sound a little bit dramatic, but I want you to hear that number again, $60,000. This is not a hypothetical. This is a real world cost of getting the legal sequencing wrong when you buy a property inside an SMSF. Double stamp duty, legal restructuring, lost time, and potentially a 45% non-compliance penalty from the ATO as well on top. Or because someone signed a contract before their trust structures were in place. That's it. One document signed in the wrong order and it can cost you $10,000 or more. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why that happens, what a bare trust actually is, what an LRBA is, and why your standard residential mortgage broker is the last person who should be handling your SMSF loan. Stick with me because this is the episode that could save your retirement. Let me tell you about a bloke. I'll call him David. David is a senior engineer, good bloke, great income, 320,000 combined super with his wife. He's been thinking about SMSF property for a number of years. Finally pulled the trigger, found a property online, brand new in a growth corridor, nice render, good numbers. His mate at work had bought in the same area. So David did what any smart, capable professional would do. He got on the phone to his mortgage broker, the same broker who'd done his home loan. Nice guy. Been using him for years. And the broker said, yeah, no worries, we can do SMSF loans. Got him pre-approved. David signed the contract, and that right there was the $60,000 mistake. Because here's what David didn't know. Here's what his broker didn't know. And here's what the property broker who sold him the house absolutely didn't know, but conveniently forgot to mention. When you buy a property inside an SMSF using borrowed funds, the legal entities must exist before the contract is signed. Not after, not during, but before. David's SMSF existed, but the corporate trustee that holds the SMSF, not properly structured, the bare trust that holds the property on behalf of the fund didn't exist yet. The LRBA, the Limited Recourse Borrowing Arrangement that governs the loan, had not been established through the correct trust structure. So what happened? The contract was signed in the name of the SMSF directly. Wrong entity. The ATO looked at this and said, this is a breach of the single acquirable asset rule. The State Revenue Office looked at it and said, wrong entity on the contract, that's stamp duty payable twice. Once for the wrong entity, and once again when you transfer it to the correct bare trust structure. Double stamp duty on a property in the $600K range, that alone can be a $30,000 to $40,000. Add legal costs to restructure, the penalty interest, and then the time value of lost momentum, you're staring at $60,000 gone from your retirement because the sequencing was backwards. And the broker had no idea because SMSF lending is not residential lending. It's a completely different product, a completely different set of rules. And most standard brokers have never read them. Now, one of the most common questions I get asked is this: what actually is a bare trust? And it's a great question because the name makes it sound very simple. A bare trust like it's a basic empty container. But inside an SMSF property purchase, it's anything but simple. And getting it wrong is catastrophic. Here's the plain English explanation. When your SMSF borrows money to buy a property, the superannuation law says the fund can't hold the property directly while there's a loan against it. The bank needs security. The ATO needs compliance. So a separate legal structure is created to hold the property on behalf of the fund. That structure is the Bear Trust. Think of it like this. Your SMSF is the owner. The Bear Trust is the custodian. It holds the legal title to the property. The corporate trustee of the Bear Trust signs the contract, manages the asset, and ensures that the property remains compliant under superannuation laws. Your SMSF is the beneficial owner. It gets the rental income, the capital growth, and all the tax advantages. The Bear Trust is the legal owner. It sits on the title. Now, here's the critical bit. The Bear Trust must be established before contract is signed, not after. If you sign a contract and then try to create the Bear Trust afterwards, you're doing it backwards. And that right there is what triggers double stamp duty and potential ATO breaches. Because when the contract is in the wrong name, you have to transfer that property to the correct Bear Trust entity later. And that transfer, well, the State Revenue Office treats that as a separate transaction. And a separate transaction means separate stamp duty. On a property worth $600,000, that's potentially another $20,000 to $30,000, just because the trust was set up in the wrong order. The Bear Trust also enforces the single acquirable asset rule. This is an ATO rule that says the property inside the Bear Trust must be a single complete asset. You can't carve it up. You can't buy a duplex and split it. You can't buy off the plan apartments that haven't been subdivided yet. One property, one title, one Bear Trust. That's the rules. Get any of this wrong, and the ATO can hit your fund with a 45% non-compliance penalty. Not on the profit, on the total value of your fund. If you've got $300,000 in super, it's $135,000 gone because of a Bear Trust mistake. Okay, so now that you understand the Bear Trust, let me introduce the other piece of the puzzle, the LRBA. The LRBA stands for a Limited Recourse Borrowing Arrangement, and it is the legal mechanism that allows your SMSF to borrow money to buy the property. Now, here's what the word limited recourse matters and why it's completely different to a standard home loan. When you buy a house in your own name, the bank has full recourse. If you default, they can come after you, your home, your savings, your assets. Everything is on the table. An LRBA is different. Under an LRBA, the bank's only security, their only recourse, is the property inside that Bear Trust. If the worst happens and the loan defaults, the bank can only take that one property. They cannot touch your personal home. They cannot touch any of your other superannuation assets. They cannot touch your personal savings. The recourse is limited, strictly limited to the asset purchased under that arrangement. That's by design. Superannuation law protects the rest of your fund. The bank takes the risk on the property alone, but this is a big but. The LRBA has strict compliance regulations. The loan must be in the name of the Bear Trustee. The property must be a single acquirable asset, and the Bear Trust must exist before the contract. The corporate trustee must be properly established, and the loan itself must come from a lender who actually writes SMSF lending products, which, as I'm about to tell you, is a very short list. Mess up the LRBA structure and the ATO can declare the entire arrangement non-compliant. That's when the 45% penalty kicks in. Not because you did anything malicious, because the structure was wrong. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And this is where most high-income professionals get caught. You've got a mortgage broker you trust. They've done your home loan. They've done an investment loan for you. Maybe done a mate's refinancing. Great bloke. Knows his stuff. And he says, yeah, I can do your SMSF loan. Same thing, really. It is not the same thing. Not even close. And here are the facts. The big four banks, CBA, Westpac, NAB, ANZ, they have not offered SMSF lending products commercially in over 10 years. Your local branch manager has no idea what an LRBA is. Your local broker, if they're a standard residential mortgage broker, has no access to SMSF lending products because the Big Four don't write them. SMSF lending is a specialised product offered by only around 10 lenders in the entire country. 10. Out of hundreds of lending institutions in Australia, only about 10 write this loan. And each one has different criteria for serviceability, liquidity buffers, and trust structure compliance. A standard broker walks into this with a residential lending mindset. They look at your income, they look at your expenses, they run a standard serviceability test, and then they lodge the application with the lender who doesn't even write the product, or worse, with the lender who does, but the application gets rejected because the trust structure doesn't match the lender's specific compliance requirements. And when that application gets rejected, you know what happens? Time. You've lost time. And in property, time means money. Your finance clause expires, your cooling off period passes, you're either forced to extend, which the vendor doesn't have to agree to, or you lose the deal entirely. Or worse, you scramble, get the structure wrong, sign the contract anyway, and trigger the sequencing disaster I just described earlier. This is exactly why inside the SMSF Property Pathway, we use specialist SMSF mortgage brokers. Brokers who know every one of those 10 lenders. Brokers who know the liquidity rules, the servicing calculations, the trust structure requirements, because they do this every single day, not once a year. For home loan broker is not your SMSF loan broker. They are two completely different professions. All right, another question I get asked all the time, and I understand why, because this one keeps people up at night. Does an SMSF loan put my personal home at risk? The short answer is no, and absolutely not. And here's why. We explicitly use a limited recourse borrowing arrangement. That word limited is doing the heavy lifting. Under an LRBA, the bank's only security is the property inside the bed trust. If the market crashes, if the tenant stops paying, if everything goes sideways, the bank can only ever touch that one property inside the fund, your personal home, legal insulated, your personal savings protected, your other superannuation assets inside the SMSF, all shielded. The whole point of the LRBA structure is that the risk is contained to the borrowed asset and nothing else. Now, that doesn't mean there's zero risk. Of course not. If the property value drops, you're forced to sell inside the fund. You lose capital inside the fund. That hurts, but it does not cross the boundary into your personal assets. That boundary, the bare trust boundary, is the legal firewall. This is another reason why the structuring has to be right. If the LRBA is set up incorrectly, if the trust structures are wrong, if the loan isn't properly limited recourse, then that firewall doesn't exist. And then you're exposed. That's not a risk you take. That's a risk you eliminate by getting the sequencing right from day one. So what's the answer? How do you make sure this never happens to you? It comes down to one principle: entity first compliance. We set up your corporate trustee and bed trust before any contract is touched. We secure your LRBA pre-approval through specialist SMSF brokers before you go near real estate. We coordinate with AFSL licensed financial advisors to build your statement of advice before a single dollar moves. Most providers do this backwards. They sell you the property first, then scramble to sort out the legal structure after. That's the Spruker model. Volume over compliance, commission over protection. We do it in the correct legal order. Entities first, contracts second, because when the entities are right, before you sign, there is no double stamp duty. There is no single acquirable asset breach. There's no 45% penalty. The structure is bulletproof before the purchase even begins. That is what entity first compliance means, and it is the difference between a multi-million-dollar tax-free retirement and a catastrophic ATO penalty. Now, what I've covered today is just one of the fatal traps that can destroy an SMSF property purchase. There are 5. I've put together a free download called the 5 Fatal SMSF Traps. It covers the sequencing disaster I just walked you through, plus other 4 landmines that catch high-income professionals off guard. Grab it from the link in the description. That's it for today's episode of the SMSF Property Pathway. Remember, buying an investment property sight unseen is a coin flip, but doing it inside an SMSF can be a catastrophic risk. You cannot save your way to $100,000 retirement income. Only leverage property can help. But you also shouldn't have to sacrifice your weekends to manage complex ATO compliance. If you're a high income professional or couple ready to step into the CEO seat of your super, click the link in the description to take our 60-second SMSF Property Pathway assessment. We'll show you exactly what is possible for your specific super balance. If you found value in today's episode, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who you think really needs to hear it. I'm Jason McCall, the SMSF Property Guy. Protect your fund, and I'll see you in the next episode.